Hey everyone, welcome to God in the Marketplace podcast. I'm your host, Andy Esposito. Today we have Paul Meuniot with us, who's a business owner doing awesome things in the marketplace. He owns Meuniot Steel, and we're excited to have him on the show. And so today we're just going to dig in. So Paul, they don't know. I know your testimony and your story, and so I want to just talk about that for a little bit because it's a pretty awesome testimony. Let's talk about that for a bit, about how, share a little bit of your testimony, how you started off in California, and how God led you to Tulsa and started this business. And I want them to kind of hear the process that kind of, and the journey that God took you on to get to where you're at today.
Okay. Well, thanks for having me. And like you said, I grew up in Northern California in a little town called Potter Valley, which is 2.5 hours north of the Bay Area. And I grew up in church, grew up with Christian parents instilling me the values of the Bible, that the Bible was the truth. And I believe around 12 years old, I had my own salvation experience where I accepted the Lord Jesus Christ into my heart. But then as I got older and throughout high school, I was a pretty wild guy. Yeah. I loved to party and just have a good time. I ended up getting married to my high school sweetheart right out of high school. We got married at 18, had our first child at 19. Then we had twins at 20, and then our last child at 24. Now, we're young parents, and I got a job in construction because my dad was an iron worker on the Golden Gate Bridge. So he got me in the Iron Workers Union, where I learned to tie rebar. It's physically very hard, but it gave me a good wage. I was able to support my family. But shortly after starting in the Iron Workers Union, I bought a piece of land way up out in the mountains, built a house there, and that's when the whole medical marijuana thing happened out in California. Yeah, so you were able to get a license to grow weed and do what you wanted there. So I got that. So under the guise of a medical license, I was able to grow weed out in the hills. Yeah, and I saw, being business minded, I saw the opportunity to start making extra income that way. So it wasn't legal to sell it, right? But it was legal. You were protected under the medical law to grow it. So I did that to supplement my income because I had a large family to feed. But through that, I just started making choices that weren't leading me in the direction of a godly man. Yeah. Developed an addiction myself. And just like I said, was making poor decisions. Sure. Now, in my heart, I always wanted to be a good father, a good husband. And I knew there was a moment where I knew my surroundings and the lifestyle I was involved in wasn't very conducive to being a godly man, a godly husband, a godly father. So a friend of mine had gone to Oral Roberts University here in Tulsa. And at one point in my life where I was making bad decision after another, I had actually moved out of my home, wasn't even with my wife at the time. Wow. But I called my wife up. I said, honey, I'm ready to come back to being the man of God that he's created me to be, but I need something kind of dramatic. I'm kind of a hard-headed, stubborn individual. I needed something that was really going to snap me out of my stupor, if you will. Yeah. So she called up our friend who graduated ORU. He worked at a church here in Tulsa. And he said, Kim, this is perfect timing. We're having a men's encounter. Wow. Put Paul on an airplane and send him over here. This is at Greenwood, right? This is Greenwood Christian Church up in North Tulsa, all black church. Yeah. And so I show up, and now my friend, he was very prophetic. He also said, well, Kim, I'm telling you though, once Paul comes over here, he's going to want to move here. And now where I'm from, Northern California, it's beautiful, lush green. The mountains, rivers, lakes, snowboarding, the ocean, everything that's right there, beautiful and amazing. I love the Northern Cali lifestyle. Yeah. So I fly into Tulsa in February of 2005. And now Tulsa's flat, there's no mountains. All the grass was dead, brown, dry, ugly. Oh, yeah. And it was freezing. And I flew in February, and I was like, man, what's this guy thinking? There's no way I would ever want to move here. Yeah. Nevertheless, I show up at this men's encounter, and there's these men in the church that are giving testimonies of being ex-crackheads, ex-crack addicts, gang banging, and doing all kinds of crazy stuff that made my little pot hustle testimony seem like mild. And yet I've observed that all these guys are good husbands, good leaders, good fathers, involved in the church. And so the first day of this encounter, I had this thought, man, I wonder if I could be the man of God he's called me to be if I were to move over here.
Yeah.
Shortly after that thought, I was like, that's a weird thought.
Yeah.
I don't know what I'm thinking, And then the next day, I'm in this men's encounter, more testimonies, more, good words. Everyone just, I'm thinking, maybe I could be that man that I would desire to be if I were to move here.
Yeah.
Again, I'm like, it's a weird thought. Now, on the third day of this men's encounter, the final day, this thought comes to me again. And instead of shaking it off like that's weird, I paused for a second and I was like, God, is this you speaking to me? And at that moment, as soon as I acknowledged the fact that it may be God speaking to me, there was a peace that came over me like no other. And I recognized this is God speaking to me.
Yeah.
So I called my wife. I said, hey, hon, guess what? I go, we're moving to Tulsa.
Wow.
Yeah. And she said, well, if that's really what God is saying, then I stand by you and that's what we'll do.
Yeah.
And she goes,
it's a good woman right there.
Yeah, very good woman. I'm so thankful for my wife.
Yeah.
And she said, if it really is God speaking this, though, I think he'll tell me too. And I go, you're right. And so we both came back to Tulsa and we kind of like Gideon set out a fleece for God to confirm. We said, God, here's our fleece, if you will. And we wrote out a list of, I think, 3 or 4 different things, very specific, that we wanted him to answer if this really was his will for our life. So sure enough, it's almost as if he went down, he did go down the list one by one and just checked them off.
Wow.
To confirm to us that.
And it's such a biblical too. Like you look at all the people that God used in the Bible, he had to separate them. He pulled Abraham away from his kindred and, where he grew up, and he had to pull him away from the mentality of, not that there was anything wrong, but God was like saying, I want to take you out into a new place that you're going to have so many, your seed will be like the stars in the sky. And it's like he had to pull him out. Moses, he separated him from where he grew up and under Pharaoh's house. And, there's you can go through the Bible and see how God separates these people. Paul had to go live in the backside of a desert, for 15 days. There is this separation that happens, and that's totally biblical, but it kind of set you on the track for what God was going to do next in your life.
Yeah, it's a key principle that you mentioned, taking you out of that familiarity, out of that comfort, where you're truly relying on God, living by faith.
Yeah.
Family members, friends, they were like, what are you doing? What are you going to do for a living over there? How are you going to make it? And I was like, well, the word God gave us was that we're going there for ministry training. Mm-hmm. We're going to be trained up to do his will.
Yeah.
And people would be, well, isn't colleges here in California you can go to? I'm like, yes, there is, but that isn't what God told us to do.
Yeah. And that, so he's preparing you to do his will, but his will wasn't in a church somewhere. Right. So talk about how you started your business.
So my experience, of course, was construction.
Yeah.
And then, hustling drugs, which I knew that wasn't going to be part of my life anymore.
Right.
But so in construction, specifically tying rebar.
Mm-hmm.
So God gave me a dream to have my own rebar company.
Like a literal dream, or was it more like a desire in your heart?
A desire in my heart.
It wasn't like you were sleeping one day, he showed you this, you woke up and you're like, oh, I gotta do this.
Okay. It was a desire in my heart.
Okay.
And in one of my visits to Tulsa, a friend of mine had a little booklet by Annette Capps on your confession.
Okay.
On like prophetic.
Oh, yeah.
Hearing.
Charles Capps? Charles Capps.
Yeah. Annette.
Oh, Annette. Yeah.
So I got a tiny little booklet. It's called Quantum Faith.
Yep.
So I pick up this little booklet and I start strumming through it, and it broke down the science of when you speak words, vibrations go out into the atmosphere, creating change, creating physical results. And I kind of nerded out to the science part of it, and I'm like, okay, everything that this booklet's saying is scientifically confirming what God's word says about speak a thing and declare it and see it come to pass.
Yeah.
So my wife and I, we packed up the moving van and packed up everything we owned, said goodbye to everyone we knew, family, friends, and we headed out to a foreign land to us, Tulsa, Oklahoma. We knew 2 people here.
Wow.
And I didn't have a job lined out. I didn't have anything lined out financially.
Yeah.
And here I am, 24 years old, my wife and I both 24 years old with 4 children to feed.
That's a step.
So I like to think I was this mighty man of faith. It may have been a little more kind of stupid optimism,
Yeah.
whatever you want to call it. Nevertheless, I set out to do it. But back to that book I got a hold of, that declaration. So in the moving van, our drive out here was a 3-day drive, like 12 hours each day.
I bet.
And as I'm driving this moving truck, every 5 minutes, I would say, Lord, I thank you for sending me to Tulsa, Oklahoma. I thank you for this business that you've put in my heart.
Wow.
Thank you that this business is going to be a prosperous business that will enable me to do what you've called me to do.
Wow.
And then I would just say that over and over and over. So when we got here, we moved into our place, and this man came over and he was installing the satellite dish for our house. And he goes, "What'd you come over here to Tulsa for?" I go, "Oh, I'm glad you asked. I'm going to start a rebar company." Because it was in me by that point. I had said it probably, I don't know how many times.
Yeah.
But for 3 days solid, I said it over and over. And he asked me, "What are you going to do?" I said, "I'm glad you asked. I'm going to build a rebar company." And he goes, "Oh, well, my brother actually works for a concrete plant. And there's this company, Cantera Concrete Company. They're super busy. They need workers, this and that. You want me to call my brother for you?" I said, "Absolutely."
Wow.
So he calls his brother. His brother gets a hold of me. The very next day, I had a job interview with Cantera Concrete, one of the leading concrete companies in Tulsa, Oklahoma.
Yeah.
So I walk in for a job interview, and I look around. Here I am, just a young 24-year-old young man. And I sat down with the superintendent that was going to be hiring me. I said, "Do you guys tie your own rebar or do you sub it out?" He goes, "Oh, we sub it out." I go, "Perfect. I'm your guy. I came here to start a rebar company, and I like to start tying all your rebar." And he looks at me kind of funny. He goes, "Well, okay, so you don't need a job?" I go, "Well, no, I need a job. I just got here. I got to feed my family." And he goes, "Okay, well, you'll need $1 million worth of insurance. You'll need a business license." Kind of went down the list of what I would need for this rebar company.
Wow. So divine, like so ordered. What are the odds that the guy that is setting up your cable knows a guy? I mean, God had that.
Total God orchestrated. I mean, there's no explanation for it.
That's amazing.
So then 3 days later, I start a job. I've got a job and got all the insurance I needed, had everything in place, went and got the business license for my steel company. And then I was out this was July in Oklahoma, very hot, humid. And I'm out swinging a hammer in the heat, working for this concrete company. Had my business license in place, everything in place, ready to go. Mm-hmm. And every time there's a big concrete pour, the superintendent and that hired me and the vice president of the company, they'd come out and look at the big pour. And I'd run over to them, hard hat, sweating, run over them. "Hey guys, I got my business license. I got everything to go. When are you going to let me bid a job?" And they'd say, pretty soon, just, And I'll be honest with you, weeks went by, months went by. I started to get a little discouraged. Because I'm over here swinging a hammer from the heat. Looking back on my days of hustling in California, making thousands. And now I'm desired to live for the Lord and not do these things. And it was a while. And finally one day, the same guy that hired me, he knows I'm working for them. He calls me up and he says, "Hey, we got a job for you to bid." I was like, "Oh, great." And then he asked me this, "What size crew do you have?" Now this guy, he knows I'm working for them. He knows I don't have a crew. So I'm like, "What size crew do I have?" And I asked him, "Well, what size crew you think we'll need for this job?" He goes, "You'll probably need 5 guys. I go, "I got 5 guys.
Wow.
I wasn't lying. I was speaking by faith. You know what I mean? He goes, "Okay, well, let me let you bid this job." I said, "Okay, perfect." I get off the phone and then I panicked. I didn't know how to bid a job.
Right.
I was like, "Oh my gosh." But see, God never going to open up doors for you that you're not able to walk through. So I called up a friend in Northern California who had started his own company. I said, "Mark, I got an opportunity to bid a job, but I don't know how to bid a job." And I was going a million miles a minute. He's like, "Hey, calm down. He goes, "I'll email you my bid sheet. Just take my company name off, your company name off. Just go step by step and you'll do it." Okay, sure enough. So I bid the job, got the job, and the rest is really history.
So you've been on your own since then?
Since 2000.
You have a successful business now and
successful company. Doing great. We've done the BOK Center. It was 18,000 seats. We did that job. Driller Stadium, big baseball stadium.
Wow.
High rises all over downtown Tulsa.
You have your own, how many employees?
Right now we're running about 40.
Okay. Wow.
And yeah.
That's great, man. And all within a matter of, let's see, I would say, was that 15 years?
17
years? Well, yeah.
15 years now. Yeah.
Wow.
2005.
That is amazing. Just watching God's hand over all that. So how would you say, like, your faith in God, how has that allowed you to impact the marketplace? Like, what's, what does that look like from us outside that are listening in? What does that look like? Someone like you, obviously God called you for this business. Yes, to fund, I know you go to Brazil, right? You've been a part of,
this is true.
You've been part of huge crusades in other countries, right? And you get to God funds that through your business.
Correct.
And stuff, right? But what does it look like for you in your faith to actually impact the marketplace as a business owner, dealing with, other business people or your employees and stuff like that? Like, what does that look like?
I think just setting an example, letting my life be a light as a man of God, as someone who operates by faith. I mean, a lot of the ups and downs when you don't see, when you're running a business, it's not guaranteed.
Yeah.
There's many ups and downs, and there's many times where, I've got to pay my employees and I don't see any money coming in.
Yeah.
And you really just get to that place of depending on God, and he always comes through.
Sure.
He always comes through. And I think just setting that example for others to see impacts others.
Yeah. Even with your raising 4 kids, letting they're growing up seeing dad take some steps of faith that lead to awesome blessings and seeing God move in awesome ways by just taking that step. Have you ever had an opportunity in the marketplace where you got to pray with people or, lead them to the Lord or anything, any type of opportunities like that you could think of or that you're conscious of?
Yeah, I not specifically leading anyone to the Lord. A lot of my workers are Catholic, so they have their relationship with God.
Yeah,
but I've definitely been there in prayer for my workers, different things. We had an actual tragedy a few years back where one worker got killed. It wasn't on our job site; it was a different job site, but it was someone that they knew.
Yeah,
and so I was there. I went to the job site, prayed for all the guys, and was there for them.
Yeah.
So
more like a lifestyle. Like we talked about this in one of our last episode. We had my pastor on and we talked about how living lifestyle Christianity in this day and age is more effective than confronting people with the gospel and saying, hey, if you were to die today, would you're going to heaven, or you're a sinner, you need to be saved, and great, Jesus is the only way. Like when you confront people like that in this day and age, they're almost putting up a guard, right? So with you, it's more like, hey, I'm just going to go out and let my light shine. I want to let people see the love of Jesus through me, my mercy and grace as I do business, with people. And that's kind of the light. Let's talk about Brazil for a little bit. That's where most of your mission trips are, right? Tell me about some awesome things that you guys have done in Brazil, some miracles that you've seen God do.
So the first time I went to Brazil, all my kids went to Victory Christian Center.
Okay.
Victory Christian School, excuse me. And for spring break trips, they send the kids on missions.
Yeah.
And so when my oldest daughter was a senior, her senior trip was to Brazil.
Oh, wow.
And so my wife and I signed up to be leaders on that trip. And so it was my first time to Brazil. And when I went, I met an amazing businessman from this area who goes on several of these trips, as well as the evangelist who's from there.
Yeah.
And it was amazing. I mean, we went to schools, and in Brazil, you can still preach Jesus openly in the schools.
Oh, yeah.
And passed out groceries to some of the poorer areas. And each day we'd go out and do these things and invite people to the big festival, big crusade that would be happening on Friday night and Saturday night. And then the crusade happening, it was packed, and there every night would be a salvation call, a healing call, and a call for people to get free from demonic oppression.
Yeah.
And each time people would, huge response every single time.
Yeah.
Every single call.
And what's his name again? It's
Ruben's cool.
Ruben. Yeah, Ruben's. I've been to one of his meetings before, and there's always people getting saved. There's always people getting healed, miraculously healed. Awesome things happen in his ministry all the time. And how long have you been a part of that with him?
I think it was 5 years ago that when I initially met him.
Yeah.
And then that in the same year, I went on 2 more trips to Brazil with him. And then just recently, last year in November, went on another trip with him.
Wow.
And he actually lives here in Tulsa now. And
Yeah.
he's a friend of mine, solid man.
We're going to have to grab lunch with him.
Yeah, definitely.
One of these days, for sure. Would you say that there is a kingdom principle in your life that's like a staple in your life and ministry? Is there like a scripture or a business, a kingdom principle that would you say is a staple in your life that you kind of build your life and your ministry on and around?
Yes. 2 of them. First one I would say is the confession of your mouth. And
Yeah.
I know some people kind of get leery of that because there's been
Name it and claim it and
claim it, all that. So some people have gotten weird with it. Some people have used it to abuse people to get money.
Mm-hmm.
But I've seen it in my personal life.
Sure.
Like I shared the story of creating my business.
Yeah.
And then there's been many times since then when I've been in a pinch to not say what I see, but to say what I see, what God has said. And it's so powerful what you speak out of your mouth. So that's the first one. Secondly, I would say is generosity. It's counterintuitive when you're broke to give your money away.
Right.
But sometimes I've done that and it's unlocked finances to come in.
Yeah.
And that can include your time.
Sure.
In times where it's been tight and I've decided to go on a trip to Brazil, sowing my time, sowing my resources to pay for me to get there.
Yeah.
And I've landed huge contracts while serving God, serving God's people in another country.
Yeah.
Come back to huge contracts for my business. So
You can't outgive God. And that's one of those things that, it's kind of like, the boy who gave the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, right? Like, someone had to have given that to God so that he had something to bless and multiply.
Exactly.
Like if no one would have given that, even God couldn't have, could he have called and opened up the heavens and had manna come down like it did in the Old Testament? He's God, right? So, but yeah, some boy had to give that.
Has to take part and be ever with it.
Because he went back home with 12 baskets full.
Exactly.
So it's more for us than it is for him, right?
Similarly, I gave my time, I gave what I had.
Yeah.
And I came back with more.
Yeah. Even I think about that a lot. I think about giving a lot because there are a lot of churches and a lot of ministers who do abuse it, right? Like it's for gain, personal gain. But the principle, nonetheless, is still there. The woman who gave her 2 mites, right? Jesus, think about that. Half a cent each. So she had a penny worth. He could have been like, no, you need that. Right? But if he would have kept her from giving, he would have robbed her of her blessing.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? Like he allowed her to give, and he's like, listen, this woman gave more than all you guys because she gave all she had.
Yeah.
And who knows what ended up happening in her life. The Bible doesn't really say, but I think that's a powerful principle. But the first one, whosoever shall say unto this mountain, be thou removed, be cast into the sea, and does not doubt in his heart, but believes in that which he says, he shall have whatsoever he says. He uses the word say 3 times and believe 1 time. I know Brother Hagin used to talk about that. But the only people that's really weird about that now is the church, if you think about it.
Right.
Because now you have all this new age stuff coming out with
intention and whatnot.
Yeah, what's that guy who did
Tony Robbins,
but then there's the guy that did the Secret.
The Secret.
Right? Like that guy's not a believer at all, right? He's an atheist.
Correct.
But he talks about the law of attraction and speaking what you want into an existence. So now the world has embraced this, right? And the church, and that's like, whoa, the church thinks it's weird, but this originated in the Bible. God was the first one to talk about the law of attraction and confessing. And so that's awesome, man. Those are 2 very staples that obviously have worked in your life. And now you have a beautiful home that sits on 52 acres or something like that. And you have a beautiful
in my heart that I've spoken out, to be honest. Yeah.
Yeah, that's you have a beautiful family, and God has blessed you just out of taking, a step of faith, which is awesome. Would you say that, moving forward, is there anything else that, in regards to like advancing God's kingdom, is there anything else in your heart, like, all right, moving forward in my business and moving forward to stay on, is there anything else that you feel like God is leading you to do into business, or he's speaking to you about any like wisdom on how to affect the marketplace? Is he speaking to you anything lately about that?
Just continue to expand, continue to push past my level of comfort. There was a time where I kind of got to a place where I kind of reached all the dreams I had for myself as a young man, and I just kind of coasted there for a minute.
Yeah.
And God would just stir in my heart to always continue. He's a God of growth. He's a God of progress. So I think that's the word for me, is to continue to expand, to push myself past my comfort.
Keep putting yourself in a position to believe and expect more things. Yeah, absolutely. That happens a lot. I would say that it's happened to me too. God starts to, you get comfortable. God begins to bless you and you get comfortable. Like when you were struggling, we had to believe God for everything.
Exactly.
When we left, we were on staff at a church getting paid nothing, pretty much. And when we came back, when God was leading us back into the marketplace, we had to believe God for everything. Furniture, food, vacations, right? And God would supernaturally come through with all of it. But then you get financially blessed, and now you get comfortable and you stop leaning into God. And I think God wants to entrust people with wealth, but do you trust him enough that even when you have $1 million in the bank and you can go do what you want, are you still going to go to God and be like, God, I want to do this, instead of just saying, well, I got the money to do it? You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Like, I think he wants that. I think he wants us to like rely on him for everything. That's why you can't serve money and God at the same time, right? And so that's a powerful statement. What would you say to someone right now who's struggling in their, who's trying to find their purpose or trying to find their calling? Maybe ministry didn't work out for them and they feel like there's something else, or maybe they're just having a hard time finding out, what is this that I'm supposed to do? Like, do you have any advice for anyone like that who might be listening?
I would say maybe lean into what you're passionate about. A lot of times we get this, especially when you have a heart for God, you think, okay, I've got to go into ministry.
Yeah.
And that seems like the right answer because you're just passionate about doing something for God. A lot of times, though, what you're passionate about will be a blessing to the kingdom, like we're talking about here.
Yeah.
Lean into that. Lean into, if you have a certain skill, get quiet before the Lord and see if that may be what he's leading you into, maybe creating your own business doing that thing.
Sure. Yeah, I use Tim Tebow a lot, and just because here's someone who loves God, loves people, but if he went to Bible school, he would have lost his platform. Do you know what I mean? Like, his passion was sports and football, and that led him to a platform that he was able to use to reach millions and millions of people. And now he's an author and writes books. But if he would have went to Bible school and been tied up in a church, locked up in a church 40 hours a week, he wouldn't be very effective, right? And so that's a good word, like finding out what your passion. He gives you the desire of your heart, right?
Absolutely.
I was reminded the other day, I was listening to Bill Johnson. He was saying that, it was David's idea to build a temple. It wasn't God's idea. And I had to go back. I'm like, wait, really? And I went back, and he's right. It was something that David wanted. It was something that was in David's heart to do. It wasn't like, and because of some decisions that David made, it was his son.
Right.
That dream and that desire was fulfilled through his son. But nonetheless, it was something that was in David's heart to do. It wasn't like, and so that's a pretty good word. Last question for you. Is there a book, and maybe it's the Charles Capps one or Annette Capps, but is there a book that you would say for anyone out there? What's a book that has really impacted you, that really just created a hunger and a desire, whether it's to fulfill God's will or to be more effective in business or how to reach people? And, is there any book in ministry or life that was a game changer for you?
Wow, there's several. I love books. You just mentioned Bill Johnson and When Heaven Invades Earth.
That's a great one. I have that one.
Greatly impacted me. I have stirred me for reaching people, for being hungry for the supernatural things of God.
Yeah.
Yes, the Annette Capps Quantum Faith book.
Yeah.
To get a hold of the confession of your mouth and the power that you really hold in that. But then on a practical level, what's helped me a lot is the book of Proverbs. There's 31 Proverbs, and there's 31 days in the month. We have periods of my life where I would read one chapter every day of the month. And each month I would do it in a different version of the Bible, New King James, and I do New Living Translation, the Message.
Wait till you do it in the Amplified. It takes longer.
And just getting that, I mean, it's the wisdom of God.
Yeah.
And it literally instructions for life, in business, in your personal life, all those things. And so just getting that over and over and instilling and helps you make better choices.
Yeah.
And gives you peace.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, man, thank you for being on the show today. It was awesome having you. And that's all we have for you guys today. Stay tuned for our next episode. Feel free to reach out to us. Send us an email, ask us questions, guests you'd like to have on the show. But other than that, that's all we have for you today. Thanks for joining.